How you doing? My name is Zach.
I'm Jared.
And today we're going to show you some basic concepts of bounces in Hyperstyle. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and just start off with just a few basic bounces, if you will. The first one I'd like to show you is a real simple one. It's just around the waist bounce. It's a real basic one. You could just start from here to get really comfortable where to kind of set your nunchucks. I like to set my nunchucks. I like to use, I guess, the opposite stick to kind of hook what point I'm kind of hitting off of, if you will. You can also move up the torso, do side to side, kind of underneath the armpit, if you will.
And then from there, there's another place you can take it, which is basically at the same level as the ribs or the chest. And basically just lower your arms down, how Zach had it just up there a minute to go under your ribs. Then to go from there, you can go to your shoulders. So you can go up to both shoulders. And then if you just raise or lower your arms either way, you can kind of change in between. So you can go here to my ribs, to my shoulder, to my shoulder, to my ribs. So it's kind of like I can start drawing this X pattern almost based on these simple bounces. Okay, so now that we've shown you a couple of just a few of the horizontal bounce points that you can kind of do, now we'll show you just a few, again, of the vertical bounce points. Some of these seem very simple, but again, once you get repetition and speed and a little bit of training with a few of the different ones, you can kind of incorporate these into some really fun flows. So some basic ones you can start with are just these simple circles and just bouncing up and down. And try practicing them in both grips, of course, front and reverse, because it definitely adds dynamic. And then you can start kind of playing with throwing, your rip tides, if you know any of those, like these sort of moves. You can kind of throw those in there to get your bounce points kind of changing and kind of adding a little more flair into it. And I know I'm kind of going fast here, but this just kind of shows that you can play with a lot of different things in front of you. These are just a few of the basic, again, starting points. So a lot of it just comes, again, from going back and forth, just like these sort of simple bounce patterns, and just kind of playing with what feels good and what feels right, and just expanding from there.
So just kind of expanding on what Jared was saying with the vertical bounces, just kind of using your hands. You could also start moving up your arm. For example, you could use your forearm or your wrist. And then move up from there, just above the elbow. Make sure not to hit the elbow, but just right above it.
Yeah, hitting the elbow would not be pretty at this point.
And then moving up to your shoulder. Kind of expanding from there, getting it kind of horizontal with your body as much as you can. You can start doing these back-to-back patterns. And from there, you could also kind of throw it underneath your arm. And hit a 4 spot, if you will. It's a 4-point hit.
Okay, so real quick, we're just going to show you just a few random different bounce locations that we like to play with. Nothing specific, nothing fancy, but again, just some weird random things just to kind of throw ideas in your head. Excuse me, so one thing that I like to kind of start doing, it's actually kind of a funny one, is it's the butt bounce. So it basically comes from kind of turning your body almost at a 45-degree angle and having your knees slightly bent, so you kind of have like a little bit of a bounce spot here. And you can basically go from your shoulder to your butt back and forth pretty quickly, which will allow you some pretty different transition points. So that's definitely one that I like to play with.
Another one that I like is going to be pretty much from shoulder to ankle and back up.
Okay, another one that I've seen a lot of people do is some in between the leg bounces, which can actually kind of go, you can kind of go all over the place with these sort of things. So I'll just kind of show a few. So you have naturally your thighs back and forth, and you can kind of go, oh, I got caught on my shorts there. So you can do stuff like this. Naturally, be careful of yourself when you're doing these sort of things.
Another one that I've been kind of practicing on, and mind you, be weary. It's kind of around the back of the neck. But you want to make sure you put your hand up and hit yourself in the face or the jaw. I've tried it other ways. it's just a lot safer, kind of putting your arm up, and it kind of gives you this mystique, you know, makes it look a lot cooler.
Okay, another one that I kind of like to do is a little bit more of a tricky one, but it's actually behind the back along the elbow. It's kind of very similar to this sort of idea here, but what you're going to do is behind the back, and so it comes from going almost in a straight wall plane behind you, and you hit under your elbow and then over the top of it, and you can kind of come back out. You can catch it, come out of it, you know, whatever.
Kind of throwing another one out there, kind of something that we were talking about from the basic, just kind of going from here. And then throw it off your shin. It's a nice high-low. And get you nice and stretched out for something, you know.
Yeah, I like that one too, that exact same one, which you'll see dozens of people doing it. Some people kind of hate on it, whatever. I don't care, it's a move to do. But you'll basically be doing a lot of those same, you know, the knee bounce or the shin bounce patterns, but then you just go from shin to the tip of your foot or to the bottom of your foot. It kind of gives you this ninja-esque, especially when you're going, you know, something crazy like that, then it kind of gets a little wild.
All right, before we get into Hyperstyle, what we're going to do is just kind of explain to you how to do a lot of the moves without actually hurting yourself. It's a really big key, is you do not want to hurt yourself. Hurting yourself really gets you kind of discouraged from wanting to attempt any of the moves again. Maybe, you know, you hurt yourself so bad it might actually scare you from ever wanting to do it again.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, he touches on a couple good points, especially when you do dive into Hyperstyle. If any of you have seen Ken Hill's videos, I'm sure you have. His Hyperstyle is fast and furious like crazy. So when you're doing a lot of these bounces as fast and, you know, furious as he does, you know, if you're working to that sort of speed, it can be painful if you're not doing it right. And like he said, the goal is not to hurt yourself, but to have fun and not get discouraged. And so we're going to kind of try to hopefully share a little bit of our technique on kind of doing the bounces and not hurting yourself by doing those. Now here, like as you see, both of us we're using foam nunchucks, which I feel for Hyperstyle is very good for beginners to learn, just because again, when you're kind of figuring out how to do some of these bounces, at first it can be easy to kind of whack yourself a little bit hard, and naturally the hardwood nunchucks are gonna hurt a lot more than these foams will. So I think it's a really good thing for beginners.
Exactly. Not only is it nice and soft just to kind of get your planes down, if you accidentally end up smacking yourself in the head. A lot of times the palm slaps are where I've kind of definitely gotten my hand pretty hard and definitely paid for it the next day. Especially with chains, using the foamies are obviously, they're rope. Using chain chucks, you have that small chance of actually kind of a pinch point, if you will.
Yep.
You really have to worry about pinch points when you're talking about the Hyperstyle and just bounces in general. Especially with the chains, if you have the chains that are really gnawed up right here, you want to be really careful at those pinch points. I can't really express that too much more.
Yeah, I've gotten so many licks just all over the place from that sort of thing, especially with wood, and like he said, with chain. Not only does it add all these like pinch points and hard things for your skin and everything to get caught up on, but it also adds more weight, which naturally as you're swinging faster and harder, you know, will end up hurting you a lot more. So it's really important to kind of, at first I think, just kind of stay light when you're learning these sort of
and not to get discouraged away from like using any kind of heavy nunchuck or chain nunchuck. We're not even saying that this is more of a viable thing. It's just for learning purposes as of right now, and learning those pinch points and going down that path, learning them through this versus that, it seems to be a little bit easier. But not to discourage from actually using, you know, heavy or chain nunchucks whatsoever.
Yeah, being totally honest, I actually learned a lot of the principles on hardwood, and it took me a lot longer, honestly, than watching some other people to get my speed up, because I was constantly like, you know, if you're doing your forearm bounces, if it's hardwood and you're just blasting yourself hard, I mean, it can actually cause injury. I mean, people that do it forever, I mean, elbows are a constant one. I know every one of us has cracked that little nubbin right there. And especially if you're doing Hyperstyle when you get into it, and if you nick that thing with your hardwood chucks, it's gonna really hurt. So it can be a little bit discouraging, kind of like he said, and so it can make the learning curve a little bit longer. So again, I feel like just to kind of get your principles down and the ideas, start with these and then progress into the hardwood, because once you get the ideas, you can do everything just as fast and just as crazy with your hard chucks, with fire chucks, if you do that sort of thing, and you don't have to worry about injury and everything like that. So
exactly. Kind of different points of where you want to put the nunchuck, in my opinion, not to really kind of hurt yourself. Kind of depends on maybe, for me, where I'm putting it. If I'm using my wrist as one of the points, jump off points here, I could wrap the chain around a little bit more and not risk too much of getting hurt. But when I'm up here on my arm, I like to kind of use more of, I would have to say, like this part of my nunchuck, and not so much getting away from the, I guess you would consider this the swivel head.
Right, that would be the swivel head.
Yep.
on a chain chuck.
So I would say this is a very bad point, and this is a very bad point. What Jarrod was kind of talking about before we started this is a good point to kind of say combat striking. Combat striking is, it's the very end of the nunchuck, has the most force. So essentially, if you kind of keep that in mind, if you're coming around here, you don't want to slam it down with the end of your nunchuck. So placement is a big must. You can't have it up too far, and you can't have it down too far.
Absolutely, and what he's touching on is very good too, and exactly like what he was saying with like the striking. When you think about force and how everything works, is not only in typically your traditional martial arts styles is when you're striking, you hold at the end and strike with the end, because that's going to give you the most power for your swing. So when you're doing it here, the idea is to not get injured. And the other thing is that too, where he was talking about here, is because it's also typically the balance point of your nunchuck. And so what that enables you to do, now when you're coming off the end, you see how the stick just wants to kind of like limply just kind of fall, whereas if I go here, it wants to kind of spring a little bit more, and it allows me to perform the bounces a little bit easier without hurting myself, and without it just wanting to kind of bounce away. I can make it redirect into these full, big, nice circles, because again, the balance point is going to be the easiest spot for you to change the momentum and direction with your nunchucks when you're spinning it and bouncing it. So if you're doing it here, it's going to be a lot harder than if you're doing it here, not only as far as the force required, but as far as the damage done to your body. So you can do this, and you basically won't even get hurt at all. Now another thing that I kind of like to do, and you'll kind of get the feel for this, is when you're doing your bounces, is you don't want to, again, like exactly what he said, you don't like just whack yourself with it. It's almost like you want to slow it down at the very last second to where it meets your arm, to where it just like, and then bounces, so you're not like driving it through and just forcing it to do this bounce. You're just going to like lightly pause it. But now that can become a little bit of a finessing thing when you're doing hyperstyle, because you're going so fast. So
exactly, it's almost like a float,
Yes.
For performance-wise, you can go into it as fast as you want, but it's all the illusion. And like I said, this could be done with the regular nunchucks, foam nunchucks. The speed, you're just gonna have to really slow it down a lot quicker. But it's just the illusion that you're coming in so quick. But exactly what Jarrod says, you have to really finesse it there at the end.
And then, not to say that this won't come without some conditioning required, because it will take a little bit of toughening, because some of it, you're still going to have a little bit of energy absorbed naturally with any sort of thing. But so I think initially when you're first doing it, especially once you break into the hyperstyle, when you're going really fast, it's going to be natural to kind of get some bruises here and there. So again, don't let that discourage you, but kind of using these sort of placement techniques will help, so that you're not beating the crap out of yourself entirely and you keep wanting to do it.
And then for the people that really haven't done the move, where would you say would be the best placement to, I guess, not necessarily slap the nunchuck, but where to redirect the nunchuck? Where would you say that you're actually grabbing it? Are you palm slapping it? Are you coming up a little bit higher on your fingers? What would you say?
I think for me, and most often, I'm kind of getting right at the callus, the callus line for, I know not all of us have those, but right across the joints in your finger right there. Which is again why it's also really critical, because you don't want to beat the crap out of your joints with the end of your nunchuck. So I'll do mine right there or on the pad there, but again, I feel like sometimes you can even run into a little bit of problem there. So I feel like if I have my preference, if I can, is to go right there, just on the callus pads of my fingers right there. And I think that's where I'm almost always ending up, as you can kind of see.
Would you probably say that avoiding like a palm, like completely using your flat palm, maybe it's too sensitive of an area?
I think sometimes, I mean, it really depends on what you're comfortable with and your conditioning. Because again, if you've seen some of Bruce Lee's crazy training, I mean, he conditioned like crazy. But you can. I've definitely had a lot more soft tissue bruising in the very, very center of my hands than some of the more padded areas of my hands. So, but again, you can make it work by all means. I think just for when I'm using harder nunchucks, especially, is I'll use the stronger part of my hand to bounce the nunchucks with. So, not to say that if you're going too fast, I mean, sometimes you're going to catch the middle of your hand and that'll be fine. I mean, as long as you're not injuring yourself, of course, that's the big thing. So. Okay, so real quick, just kind of lightly touching on Hyperstyle. I definitely feel like, I don't know if you feel the same way about you, but I'm definitely not a Hyperstyle expert by any means. But again, I just kind of know some of the basic principles and stuff like that. But basically what it is it's a lot of very fast bounces, transitions, and movements that are very just tied to the body, and you basically do it just as quickly as you can manage it. Now naturally, you're probably going to start off a little bit slow as you kind of progress, but again, if you've seen Ken's videos, it can be done insanely fast. It's kind of blinding. So yeah, we're going to kind of just briefly touch a little bit on some different things that we like to do in kind of our Hyperstyle fashion, if you will. So
I guess I can kind of go first. I'm a lot more basic with it. I just haven't really put myself into the Hyperstyle. I like a lot of bounces and redirects. So my Hyperstyle I'm really practicing on. So I guess here we go.
See, that's very nice, and see, he discredits himself, but that wasn't bad at all. See, and that's exactly kind of what Hyperstyle is you just do very quick bounces. And now, kind of relating this to the challenge that we're kind of doing this week, which I know some of you may not, have kind of an idea what that is exactly, but doing, that many bounces in a minute, you can get dozens, if not hundreds, if you're going crazy with it. So it kind of shows you where it can add up. But so real quick, I'll just kind of show you a light one again. I just have a few general bounce points that I do, so I'm not very advanced either. But okay, so again, very simple. So as you can see, definitely mess up a lot. Definitely not perfect at it, but those are some of the ideas and principles behind Hyperstyle. So again, you can take it as far as you want it, as quick as you want to go. I mean, you can get down and go crazy low and do all sorts of nutty stuff with it. But we're just going to kind of touching on some of the basics. So.
All right. So really hope that we can kind of shed a little bit of light out there for the people that were having some issues or maybe questions or maybe just needed some ideas on bounces.
Yeah, we just kind of wanted to share some of our ideas. Again, we're just kind of skirting the basics. I mean, there's a whole world of things you can do, spins and turns and all sorts of crazy fun things. But again, we just kind of wanted to share some of the rudimentary ideas, and then that would kind of spark some ideas along the lines. And hopefully, you guys can show us some pretty fun things, because we are willing to learn by all means. So
definitely. So like we said, hope this was very informative and helped you out a whole lot in your progression in spinning.
Yeah, thank you so much to everyone for taking the time to watch. And if you have any questions or comments for either of us, hit us up. Again, I'm Jarrod. This is my wonderful friend Zach, and hope it helped.